Welcome to this video tutorial. This one is building a basic synthesizer in Reaktor. The reason I'm using Reaktor is because a lot of people are terrified of it and they never really get into its depths, and I feel that that's a shame. It's a great synth. It's not just a synth, it's a great program in total. And it's not as difficult as people seem to think it is. But also, it's a completely modular synth. Whereas in the other videos I'm using Zebra, which is a wireless modular, and I'm using Predator as well, which is a fixed architecture synth. So it gives you a different view or perspective on the whole synthesis building issue. And Reaktor can make things as difficult or as easy as you like. In this instance we're going to go with easy, and to that end we're going to be using macros to build our synths. Quick explanation of what a macro is. Basically it's a tool, or not so much a tool, it's a module that contains other modules, if you like. So the macro itself contains modules within it that makes the building process easier, which I can show you when we're building the synth. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. First thing we need to do is go File, New Ensemble. Okay, so as you can see we've got a new ensemble here. A quick overview of that. It's your inputs, your outputs, the master, control level, and the instrument itself that we're going to use to work with. Okay, so this is what's known as the ensemble structure. We also have the ensemble panel, which if you click on this little button up here, you'll see it. That's the ensemble panel. There's where your master is, and there's the instrument. As we go on and you add things to the synth, this is where they'll show up. So if we click on this button to go back to the structure. For the purposes of the synth that we are going to be creating, we need to work on this instrument section. Now in this instance, as you can see, this has got an LR and an LR. If we double click that, you can see it's got two outputs. Now we're only going to be using one output in this case because we're only making a mono synth. So we need to click on this little arrow and we need to delete this instrument here. So we right click on it, delete. To create a new instrument, right click, insert instrument, new, one in, one out, and there we go. That's our new instrument created. Now I can just double click that and show you what the difference. As you can see, there's only one output now and one input. So we click that to go back. Okay, now what we need to do is attach the instrument's outputs to audio output 1 and 2. So to do that, you just left click here, you'll see a little finger pop up, drag over and connect like such, like so. As you can see, the light came on to show there's a connection. So we have our main instrument connected to outputs 1 and 2, left and right if you like. If we go back to the panel, again you'll see that's the instrument we just created there. One of the things we need to do is drop this to maybe -10, because what we don't want to do is hurt our ears when we're working creating this initial synth. So now we have our basic instrument. We need to add an oscillator to it. So double click the instrument, brings us into the main in and out section of the instrument. To select more than one thing at once, just left click anywhere outside and drag. On the Mac it's control click here, just drag it like so and move it. So I'm just moving it over here to give us a little bit of space. So to create the oscillator we need to go right click, and we're using macros, remember. You can go built-in module and see that there's oscillators in there, but we don't want to do that. We're using macros in this instance to make it easier. So building blocks, oscillators, and we'll go for the oscillator, PLS, saw and tri. For pulse, saw and triangle. So we click that, there we go, there's the oscillator. Now, just to show you why we're using a macro instead of going the built-in module oscillator path, is if I create a sawtooth oscillator, that's all it is. If I double click it, well, if you double click it, what happens is the properties comes up, but there's nothing else there, it's just the sawtooth oscillator. If I double click this one, as you can see, there's already a structure within that for the pulse, the sawtooth, the triangle. It's already been set up in such a fashion, so if you weren't using the macro we would have to create that. So the macro is much easier. Okay, so we've got our sawtooth. What we now need to do is connect our sawtooth output to the input of the voice combiner, and as you can see there, what it does, it mixes a polyphonic audio signal to mono. So if we take the output, drag it over, there we are. Our oscillator is now connected to the audio out through the combiner, so we now have our most basic structure. The next thing we want to add is an envelope. So again, it's the same process. Right click, macro, building blocks, envelopes, and we're just using the basic ADSR envelope for attack, decay, sustain and release. Click that, there we go. Okay, now that we've got the envelope, we're not going to do anything with it at the moment because we need to add another couple of components first. Modules as they're known, these are modules. We need the note pitch and the gate modules. What these two modules will allow us to do is trigger the synth via our MIDI keyboard. We need to right click, built-in modules this time because they're not macros. MIDI in, we need the note pitch, and again right click, built-in module, MIDI in, we need the gate. Okay, now that we've got them, we need to make some connections. Now the first connection that we need to do is add the note pitch module to the pitch input of the oscillator. Again, drag and drop, there we go. The next thing we need to do is add the gate to the envelope. So the gate output to the G for gate on the envelope. Finally, we need to add the output of the envelope to the amplitude input of the oscillator, which we do like so. Okay, so now we've got a basic synth. We've got the note pitch controlling the pitch of the oscillator, which means that when we do this, it works. We have the ADSR being controlled by the gate, the output of the ADSR going into the oscillator, and the output of the oscillator going into the output, which gives us that nice basic synth. Okay, the next step that we want to add to our synth is a filter. So again, it's right click, macro, building blocks, filters, and we will use the 4-pole BP BLP LP filter for band pass, band low pass and low pass. There we go. Now that we've added the filter, we need to do a little bit of rewiring. So we'll just move this across here for a second. What we need to do is put the output of the oscillator into the filter, then the output of the filter into the output or the voice combiner. But we just call this section the output for ease. Now the reason we're doing this is because we want the filter to shape the oscillator. So we just left click and drag again from the output to the input. We need to get rid of that connection there, so just left click on it and it will go blue, hit delete, and it goes. Then take the output into the input of the voice combiner, and you know you've done it right when you see all the little yellow lights go on. So we'll just give this a bit of structure. So now we've got a nice basic synth. If you press play, you probably won't hear anything because the filter is probably filtering everything out at the moment. Okay, so now that we have our basic synth, and I forgot, if you just left click the in section there and delete it because we're not using any inputs. What we need to do now is go to the front panel and make it look a bit like a synth. If you come up here and click on the front panel, you'll see we've got a mess. As you can see here, all these different bits of writing and stuff, that's all the different parts of the synth that we've created all on top of each other at the moment. So to release this, if we grab it, we can't actually move anything at the moment. So to release this so we can move it and tidy it up, you need to select this little spanner here. If you left click on that, you see all the little dots? That means that we can now start adapting this. So the first thing we want to do is move the master. So if we just drop that up there, in fact if we can drag it over here to the top, that'd be better, and then grab this instrument and just drag it down here like so. Okay, and if you come here, you'll see if you left click, things go red. Whatever goes red, just left click and hold, control click Mac, just drag it down, down. Okay, so there's the components that we created. There's the oscillator, with pitch, fine, pulse width, pulse, so on, triangle. There's the filter that we created, and there's the ADSR envelope that we created. Probably the best way to have them is the ADSR envelope above the filter. So we can just drag that down, drop that in there, drop that there. So we now have our little fledgling synth. Click on the spanner again, and now you can't move any of these. You can select them. So let's see if we can get some sound out of it. Okay, nothing's happening at the moment. So if we go saw wave, bring these down, put the sustain right up, cut off, there we go. It's very low. However, we can hear something, so we know we're getting an output. Obviously this is very low as well, so but we'll leave it at -10 for the time being. Okay, so there's our very basic synth. So now we need to add a second oscillator in this instance. Again, very simple. Click on the structure. There's two ways of doing this now. There's the long way and the easy way. The long way is right click, macro, building blocks, oscillator, and that, or you can just come here, left click on that, on the oscillator we've already got, right click, select duplicate, and that's it. There we have it. Now, because we've got two oscillators now, if we come back to here, they're going to be called the same thing, as you can see. If I drag it over here, they're both called oscillator 3, which we don't want. So come to the structure, select the top oscillator, right click, select properties, and in here, change it to oscillator 1. And do the same on the next one and change that to oscillator 2. Just keeps them separate from each other, and then we know what's what. Come back to here, oscillator 1, oscillator 2. Excellent. Okay, now we need to do some rewiring as well, because what we now have is two separate oscillators. So we need a mixer that allows us to mix the two oscillators together. Okay, the mixer can be found, right click, built-in module, signal path, amp mixer. Okay, now we need to add the outputs of both oscillators to the mixer. So we'll just move these over here, and we'll move this up here. Now at the moment you can see there's only one input, but we need two inputs for the outputs of these oscillators. Very easy to deal with. Left click on that connection and hit delete to get rid of it. We then connect the output to the input. And now to create a second input for this oscillator, what you need to do is left click whilst holding control down, command and drag for Mac. Bring it over to the mixer and you'll see what happens. The mixer creates another input automatically for you, which is great. But we want to kind of move these around a bit, so we'll leave that like that. Now that was just me being fussy. What I didn't want was the output going to that one and the output going to that one, because I could have just done that, moved them up, but that's just the way I work. So now we have the two outputs of the oscillator coming into the mixer. We would then connect the mixer again to the input of the filter, and that's it. If we go back to the panel, we won't actually see anything yet with regards to the mixer because we haven't created the level controls, which is what we're going to do now. To do that, it's very easy. As you can see, we've got two level controls here. If you right click on them, select create control, creates a nice little level fader for you. Same again, right click, create control, and we now have two level faders. If we come here now, there they are. Just unclick the spanner, bring them over here. So we've now got two levels, one for each oscillator. Now this is a bit where you can start to get slightly confused.